Well, hello everyone. Nice to be here. I am Martha Cotton. I'm the global co-lead of Fjord, which is design and innovation from Accenture Interactive. I'm also one of the leads for our annual Trends report. It's really exciting to be presenting today at South by Southwest, and again, the challenge of terminology about how to even talk about what I'm doing here really reveals something bigger that we are all grappling with, which is kind of making sense of this new world that we find ourselves in. So this is what Fjord Trends is all about. Now, Fjord Trends is in our 14th edition. And what we do in Fjord Trends is we examine each year the intersection of people, technology, and business, and really think about what will be shaping the way we create products and services in the year or 2 years ahead. This year, we have 7 trends to talk through at a high level today. And if you like them, of course, there's a PDF to download where you can find much more content and evidence around each of the trends. So, as we do every year, we gather evidence to identify our Fjord Trends, and we crowdsource this evidence from over 2,000 designers, creators, thinkers, and doers from around the world that are part of the design community Accenture Interactive. So we take all of that evidence, and we are literally talking every corner of the globe. We take that evidence, we synthesize it, and this year what came out were these 7 trends. And we'd love to show you a video of what that sort of process looks like. So let's roll the videotape and hope you enjoy it.
Mark? Uh-oh. Mark, I think we lost you.
Can you hear me still? Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Sorry,
back.
I lost you.
You were in the middle of a thought, though, Mark. Can you finish? You want to finish? Oh, no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mark?
Yeah, sorry.
Whatever he says, can you hear me now?
Sorry, I'm a bit problem. Morgan, have we missed Columbia somehow?
I'm not sure.
Sounds like it, given the silence.
Martha, you're muted.
Have you told everyone about the automatic electrocution if the idea isn't good enough? So, should we get going?
Let's go.
Hello, calling from a sort of rainy Hertfordshire with sheep outside.
This is Dylan from Chicago.
Renato here from Brazil, here Rio.
I'm Daniela from Buenos Aires.
John from Melbourne.
We are Pepe and Israel from Mexico City.
This is Crystal Wong from New York.
Hey, good evening from Tokyo.
I'm Jonna, I'm from Warsaw.
Hi, I am Viraj here at Fjord Stockholm.
Tolga from Dubai.
Hello, this is Huang Yue from China. This is Olga and Henny from Helsinki.
I'm here in Barcelona.
I'm Virginia from the Madrid studio.
Hi from Milan.
All hail happiness.
The world in my little corner.
The death of convenience.
Open knowledge.
Everything is politics.
Science rock.
Mind the gap.
The home metamorphosis.
Outrage economy.
The homebody economy.
Reality swapping. Remote revolutions.
Back to the village.
Social needs civics.
Home Alone.
Humanity unmasked.
New activism frontiers.
Supercharged networks.
The war of the narratives.
Let's all hail happiness.
I agree.
Yay!
You know, just a exhilarating and good way to kick off trends. I'm taking one word out of that actually, Talia, which is empowerment. And the protest is a form of empowerment when people have been disempowered by being made to stay at home. I think that's really interesting.
And I love that question you posed, Shonda, around what happens to culture when you remove place. I think that's a super interesting thing to explore.
The purpose and I&D piece is a trend. Every year is interesting in and of itself. It means that people aren't doing anything about it, even though people are talking about it.
Yeah, when kind of looking at both trends together, our worlds have gotten smaller, yet distance doesn't mean anything.
I think that's a massive insight.
Embedded in what you're saying, Talia, is the recognition that all of these systems are designed.
These are absolutely fresh, and I don't think anybody has touched on these points before.
The idea of innovation coming from an entirely new place.
That explosion of our experiences and our worlds maybe being more confined, but being in many more sort of virtual environments at the same time. Super interesting.
I really love that framing. I hadn't actually thought of sort of mass connection in terms of maturity and it's really right.
I think you absolutely nailed what two of the trends should be about.
I just love the death of blank as a trend. I love the provocation there.
As things are fragmented, we're trying to find a new kind of efficiency in our lives. There's something huge in that, and I really love this trend. Thank you.
Yeah, that was cool. I think everyone was like, is living in this headspace right now. This is such a cool trend. Right? It's different than ones we've heard in the past.
I would be stunned if the shift to home and all of that entails isn't one of the major things that we say. But honestly, those just blew me away. You bloody close. No more to say.
Thanks so much for your hard work. I know this is a true labor of love, kind of amazing and very rewarding to hear what people are finding as trends around the world.
I just love the way that pretty much everybody from the other teams have stayed on and participated in the debate. Our culture is amazing sometimes, and today is one of those days when I'm feeling it, so thank you very much.
It's so fun to, I hope you can get a sense of how much fun it is to kind of hear from our colleagues around the world and really pull out what the trends are. So every year, once we get a good sense of what those trends will be, we do take a minute to step back and look for a meta theme, a theme that will serve as a through line for all the trends. Now, last year, for 2020, we predicted a realignment of the fundamentals, a rethink entirely of everything around how businesses and why businesses exist. Now, who could imagine when we wrote the report for 2020 what the year would actually be like? And so what we've seen is that the pandemic only accelerated the realignment of these fundamentals that we envisioned back for 2020. We know that the pandemic changed how we live, how we work, learn, shop, how we play, as well as how and where we experience things. It's highlighted what's important to us and inspired community, spirit, and ingenuity. So we're not going to ignore the pandemic, but they really have become a huge influence on the trends, as you'll see as we walk through them. So the meta trend for this year, we're calling out mapping out new territory, and that's our meta trend for 2021. So as we look to the future, a wealth of potential worlds open up in front of us, new territories. Some are scary, some are exciting. All of them are largely unexplored, which means we have the opportunity to map this new world. Now, it's interesting, in the Middle Ages, cartographers wrote, "Here be dragons," to indicate areas of the oceans that were unexplored. So stumped to know what to put into that empty space, they imagined, well, dragons are there. So what we're seeing now is a need to redraw the maps again. In this case, thinking about what we want from the 21st century, and what we do not want is dragons. We've had enough of those. So we really want to redraw the maps, kind of take this opportunity of remapping the world in the way that we want them to be. So what we're seeing for 2021 is about creating new maps that will help us uncover what's yet to come and planning the route to the world we want to live in. I know this is scary, but it's also about new opportunity. We think we're all exploring, which is creating a safe place for experimentation, for prototyping, for learning. And throughout history, after a global crisis, a new era of thinking begins. And right now we have that opportunity to decide actually what we want that 21st century renaissance to look like. So starting appropriately in 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our trends. And the first one this year is called collective displacement. What we've seen in 2020 is literally how and where we experience things changed. This has left us feeling disconnected from familiar comforts, both the big ones and the small ones. And we've felt this displacement literally in the experience where the warp and weft of our lives, where we live, where we work, all of the ways that we experience our life has felt this displacement. People who are able have fled cities, for example, with many deciding not to come back. By September, for the first time since the Great Depression, 52% of young adults were living with their parents. So we felt activity displacement as well. And the things that we do shift from in real life to online. Yoga, for example, is an activity that has adapted to our displacement. And turns out this may have shown us new ways to be with, as experiences gains as well as losses. we've also felt community displacement. From things we used to do that to allow us to feel connected and part of a community, how we worship, for example, the teams that we celebrate. These are things we used to do together, but now we do alone or in pods. And finally, we've had displacement over the sense of agency over our choices, which adds to the sense of disconnect and loss. This pushes things that bring us joy kind of beyond our reach. Now, as our patterns of movement have changed due to our collective displacement, brands are facing a visibility challenge, which flows two ways. The customer we once knew is gone. This is complicated by tracking ad tech disruption, which is biting already through iOS and Android. But brands and organizations, we feel, must question everything they thought they knew about their customers and understand what shifts in their behavior will be long-term. Brand experiences must be able to be delivered at a distance. And several organizations have navigated this well. At the London Marathon, for example, in October 2020, saw a staggering 43,000 runners participate virtually. And we've just learned that actually for next year, the London Marathon plans to do a hybrid event where they'll have 50,000 runners in person, assuming the pandemic will allow, and 50,000 virtually. So this is a great example of how a bespoke online experience can successfully shake up something we may only have imagined happening in person. So we have to rethink how people gather information as well, and how people discover new products and services in this era of collective displacement. So my commute for work, for example, is gone. This leaves me without all the visual cues I might see amongst my fellow commuters, or advertising in the train station. Shanghai Luxury Art Mall K11 enables people to tour, browse, and purchase from 46 different branded stores via WeChat as a way to kind of find people in this era of collective displacement. So what we're seeing from shopping is that it must shift from being centered around destination to embrace atomized micro moments, which are now spread throughout the day and across devices, and prompted also by social media. We must learn to convey texture and other tangible aspects of products and services via digital means. Nike, for example, uses augmented reality to help people get the right sneaker fit without trying on a shoe in store. And lastly, we must learn to create joy through immersive experiences as we interact with people, but from a distance. MAC Cosmetics, again, uses AR to enable customers to virtually try on products via YouTube, which reinforces the joy of makeup in a digital platform. So displacement as a human experience is a trauma, and as people seek stability in the unknown, we think that businesses have a role to play here in giving people hope, and a way to offer a sense of place and agency as we adjust to all the ways we now show up as humans. So in a way, collective displacement is a bit of an anchor trend, and our next trend, do-it-yourself innovation, certainly reflects this. So trend number 2, do-it-yourself innovation. During a time of displacement, as traumatic as it is, as I just described, it's also inspiring to see the rise of human ingenuity as a response to challenge. We all know that design and innovation love constraint, and during this time of profound constraint, we're seeing people get creative in amazing ways. This results in a pressing need for organizations to rethink their approaches to innovation by offering tools instead of prescribing solutions, and by empowering people to get more creative with how they live, how they work, play, learn, and shop. The key aspect of this trend is that innovation has shifted from tech first to people first. Now, we've always seen life hacks, so people hacking technology, products, and services to work better in their lives. I'm thinking recently of a colleague of mine who hacked an ironing board during the lockdown to use as her stand-up desk. But what we're seeing here is that people are radically repurposing entire platforms to work better for their own experiences. So we need to think of platforms now almost as a half-painted canvas upon which people will create and finish a product based on their needs. In Lebanon, for example, post-lockdown and in the wake of Beirut's devastating port explosion, schools turned to WhatsApp to use it as an informal, distant learning program. Or slightly more on a fun note, Travis Scott used Fortnite, which is a popular gaming platform, as you all know, but he used it as a virtual concert venue. Now, one of the things I love about this trend is that it blurs the line between creator and customer. In the design field, we've long used co-creation methods as part of our design process, where we involve the end user in the design process. But now co-creation is as much an output as an input. So for companies to succeed, they will need to think of their products and services as suggestive of use instead of prescriptive. To start designing tools and platforms that enable people to create for themselves and shape technology around their goals. Release these products and services into the world and let the end user and consumer finish them. Now, we all know that innovation isn't just about ideas, it's about having the courage and fortitude to see new ideas through the development cycle and into the market. This is why time and stamina are so crucial to innovation success. But we think that this trend points to ways to gain tremendous efficiency, focusing on everyday people's creativity. Just the other day, my 16-year-old daughter showed me a new musical of Ratatouille, an animation that was written and choreographed through crowdsourced TikTok users, pulled together over just a few months and recorded by a famous Broadway and other artists. So a great example of both innovation and finding great efficiency in it. So if that's not do-it-yourself innovation, I don't know what is. Our next trend is sweet teams are made of this, and this is kind of our trend about working and employment and employees. What we're seeing here is a wholesale change in the reciprocal employment agreement between employer and employee. Much of the peripheral value of work has been lost for people. So think about a new employee not meeting new peers or forming networks or learning basic how-tos from older colleagues. Think about the serendipitous exchange you might have with a coworker in the cafeteria or a break room. And, it's also just less fun without this peripheral ways to engage with your colleagues. Many of the costs also previously covered by the employer has shifted to the employee. So think desk, heating, broadband, those free coffees you might get. Working from home has become living in your office with family and childcare at the core of it. Now, we don't think the workplace is dead, but now really what it has become is a mindset supported by technology. And we don't think the future will be one size fits all. There are three vectors of opinion here. So worker, company, and local government. So two of these, worker and employer, contain a range of sometimes contradictory views on what's next. Workers split between I want to go back and actually I will be working from home half my time from now on. And employers split between what, say, Reed Hastings at Netflix has done, who has seen it as a creative disaster, and CFOs who are actually keen to take advantage of a once-in-a-company lifetime opportunity to save on overhead costs. Government, as this other vector, is scared of the social and economic impact of hollowed-out city centers and putting pressure on businesses to go back to work to bring some economic engine back into these city centers. So importantly, I've talked a lot about office workers. We do want to say that this stretches beyond the office worker. We think sweet teams are made of this affects any jobs that could be done remotely and those that are reliant on urban office hubs. So think dry cleaners, pharmacies, bars, restaurants, even mass transit workers. Now for employers, there is an opportunity to innovate, we think, and we see this around four areas. Certainly an opportunity to innovate around technology. New software and hardware to support that mindset of workplace. And many of you who are listening are likely painfully aware, we are really lacking the hardware and infrastructure suitable for long-term remote working. There's also an opportunity to innovate around culture. Employers need to build a sense of belonging for when we are physically apart, recognizing that face-to-face is a premium. There's an opportunity to innovate around talent and how we recruit and reward talent. With remote working, recruiters can throw the net wider, and candidates are also able to be choosier about who they want to work with, leading to a reassessment of valuing and rewarding talent and location-based pay bands. Silicon Valley companies, for example, are offering the opportunity to work anywhere if workers accept that their salary may be reduced in line with the changes in their cost of living. And lastly, we see innovation around control. How best to control and when is it appropriate to do so? This highlights the important issues around privacy and quality of experience. sales and surveillance software to check that home workers are actually working, such as Staff Cop or always-on webcam monitor, video monitor Sneak. These have boomed during lockdown. So we do think as well, we need to make sure we consider the ethics of remote work as we examine the changing landscape of where and how employees engage with their employer. The reciprocity lens, what you give and what you take, must be central to our thinking. Acknowledge that each employee's home is still their personal space and that their privacy and their privacy and freedom is important. So we're just entering an era of prototyping here, of what the future of work could look like, and only just starting to chart new territories. Our next trend, interaction wanderlust, really builds on how people work, as I've just talked about, but also how they collaborate, how they communicate with each other. It's been an overwhelming aspect of our lives, even before the pandemic, that screens have become extensions of ourselves. But in the last 10, 12 months, as screens became our window to the world, the interactions have honestly become dull, exhausting. Joy and serendipity in our interactions have become lost, and the importance of that periphery that I talked about in the last trend is entirely missing from our interactions. What's interesting here is there's been a convergence between design, content, and audience. Our screens have become both our window to the world as well as our stage, and we've seen many taken to purposefully designing the stage that they perform on when on screen. There's the ubiquitous joke of, wearing a dressy top and yoga pants on the bottom. I noticed recently that both my kids are making their beds every day now, which is a modern day miracle if there ever was one. And then I realized that's because their beds are in full view as they attend Zoom school. So with the falling costs and rising quality of camera and editing tools, professional and amateur content producers have become meeting in the middle and influencing each other. For example, in the US, a late-night host and comic Seth Meyers, like many in his field, started shooting his TV show from home last March. And he was helped, interestingly, by Australian YouTube personality Matt Parker, who gave him tips on how to be better at producing content made in your home. What is also interesting here is that designs for screens has been dominated by leading operating systems for the past 25 years. This has restricted creativity and has led to overuse and a frank commoditization of templates. This limits our expectations for how we experience things online. And this has created the sameness and fatigue to our interactions. The joy we should feel when interacting with other humans has dulled. And with 2020 mostly limiting us to the screens we have at home, our peripheral vision of those interactions has been lost, something that many of us never knew we needed. But we have started to mourn the loss of that serendipitous exchange needed to feel genuine connection with each other. To address this, we have seen significant experimentation around using gaming platforms, social platforms, and mixed reality environments as a stage for third-party content and audience participation. Back when he was a candidate, Joe Biden and U.S. Representative from New York's 14th Congressional District, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they used Animal Crossing to meet voters and to make random house calls to players' virtual islands. We've also seen the rise of like a 47% rise in the use of Discord, which traditionally is a platform for gamers, but it turns out it's a great way for communities to come together to discuss art or reconnect in the clubs that they're part of. So the call to action here, we think, is to find ways to recreate offline emotions in online contexts. We think companies can innovate by redesigning audience participation to more effectively draw audiences into an experience as viewers or active participants, as creators or co-creators. Genius Live, for example, moved from an online music lyrics source to a concert platform, enabling new and creative ways to connect fans and artists. And certainly South by Southwest is a great example of finding new ways to connect and support our interaction wanderlust. So our next trend is called liquid infrastructure. And this is very much the flip side of collective displacement. In collective displacement, we talked about how and where we get things has changed. In liquid infrastructure, we show how this has forced businesses to reshape how they manufacture, ship, store, and deliver. Our liquid expectations, we think, for products and services now extend to the delivery and the unboxing experience, which is frequently entirely outside of a brand's ecosystem. And this has implications for everything that happens before that moment. We know the cost to serve has risen dramatically for several reasons. The loss of incidental spending, typically found from impulse buys in store, also retail health and sanitary costs, as physical retailers have adjusted to make those who do venture inside feel safe. We also know that volume efficiencies of the idea of shop, as people now anatomize their shopping across numerous online retailers, has also increased the cost to serve. And not to mention higher returns due to the increase in online shopping. But meanwhile, direct-to-consumer models have proven really difficult to scale. Home delivery is costly, and customers don't want to manage one-to-one relationships with all the brands with which they engage. But nevertheless, many brands have gone there, including mainstream staples like Kraft Heinz and PepsiCo. Closeness to the customer, we think, is clearly key in this trend, and brands need to rethink the trade-offs between experience and cost, and design around the last 6 feet of the experience. We used to talk about the last mile. Now it's really the last 6 feet. And thinking about how to delight and make delight matter, and the trade-off between delight and efficiency. So this is leading brands to rethink the position of their supply chain and expand the idea of what their assets are used for. The rapid adaptation of initial lockdowns globally shattered conventions. Barclays Bank, for example, now expects its physical branches soon to be mainly used by call center workers and investment banking. In many cases, the pandemic drove new partnerships to be created ad hoc. So expect the rise of a B2B sharing economy and partnerships over costly ownership investment. Dark kitchens, for example, started serving home food delivery as one sign of this. But remember that deprived of a hospitality experience, brand saliency becomes harder to achieve in these circumstances. New value propositions and business models will lead to a two-speed innovation, we think here, embracing the ability to respond rapidly to change, but stay true to long-term purpose with core programs. The value of supply chain will go beyond efficiency, measuring it on growth, flexibility, and agility. And personalization at the point of delivery will become a differentiating opportunity, possibly with 5G as a driver. And last but not least, yet another curveball. Supply chain redesign will enable brands to consider more local and sustainable alternatives. As we've been tracking for a few years in our trends reports, consumers are increasingly scrutinizing brands they engage with for the health of the planet, looking at not just the product itself, but where it comes from and how it got to the store, to their home. Sweden's IKEA, for example, recently opened its first secondhand shopping center. Or German company Urban Drivestyle builds all of its e-bikes in Berlin and is working to transfer its entire supply and production chain to Germany and Europe. So we think openly committing to shifting to sustainable redesign is key here. And within 5 years, sustainability will be the biggest influence on your infrastructure decisions. Start figuring out how you will design for sustainability now. Organizations can and should build agility and resilience across their supply chains. This is not just about being able to manage any further shifts caused by the pandemic and its aftermath. However, it's really about future-proofing for changes that we will all face one day. Our next trend is near and dear to my heart as an anthropologist and a researcher, and we call this the empathy challenge. And what this addresses is the challenge we have with empathy and the stories that we and organizations tell each other about ourselves as humans and as societies, with systems designed, and sometimes purposefully, unequally. We know there is too much to feel empathy for as we enter the 21st century. And in a world of high expectations and constant scrutiny, the challenge is to make the empathy we have for each other and that brands declare publicly actually means something. Awareness and concern about inequalities in all its form grew rapidly in 2020. The global pandemic certainly exacerbated existing inequalities, but also created new ones. For example, women were 3 times more likely than men not to work during the pandemic because of childcare needs at home. And additional inequalities arise based on who has access to bandwidth, to healthcare, to work, school. Everything people need to function in our collective displacement creates acute need and a call to feel empathy for those who cannot get those needs met. But this poses a challenge for organizations as they try to respond, which is making it even more important than ever to manage these narratives well. So we have so much to feel empathy for, and never have there been more different narratives fighting for our attention than there are today. In our Fjord Trends for 2020, last year, we identified a growing tension for organizations between profit and purpose, and a rise in taking a purpose-led approach. So in the Empathy Challenge this year, this has only become more intense, as companies now have to figure out how they want to handle polarizing narratives, how to align their purpose with these narratives, and which side of a story, if any, they chose to support, because staying silent, as we know, is also a choice. This has resulted in some interesting examples. So in September of last year, Yelp's decision to warn users about businesses accused of racism sparked massive debates online. Last summer, Bon Appetit's statement on their website in support of the Black Lives Matter movement resulted in an immediate reckoning as current and former employees pointed out the hypocrisy of this as they shared stories of systemic racism at the magazine, which ultimately resulted in the resignation of the editor-in-chief. It's never been more important to get your empathy narrative right and to tie it to your purpose, and then importantly, have actions that give that empathy true meaning. Patagonia is a great example of a brand that has navigated this challenge really well. They have a clearly stated purpose, and then they make bold moves that tie to it. Now, it's impossible to talk about empathy without mentioning the role that it has in design. As most of you know, empathy has long been fundamental to good design, and I certainly agree with this myself. But over the years, with the rise of design thinking, empathy has been made to seem like something that can easily be ticked off a list. And this highlights the discomfort in design of the place of privilege many designers actually come from. And the notion that with an afternoon of empathy building, we can truly design for people that are different from ourselves. The key here with the Empathy Challenge is to shift our notion of empathy from a thing you do to a way to be, to abstract your empathy into a series of meaningful actions that will have positive impact for those you're designing for. We all know stories have always mattered. They are central to the human experience, and now they've become a core part of a brand's image too. Effectively managing the stories you tell to reflect the empathy you feel as aligned to the purpose that drives your organization and the actions your organization takes has never been more critical. And now for our last trend. It's called Rituals Lost and Found, and we really want to kind of end on a hopeful note, and I kind of think the Rituals Lost and Found title says it all. What we've all collectively experienced is that rituals, both big and small, form the framework of our life. Strong sentimental significance is attached to rituals, and they are deeply human. They help us deal with loss, with routines, with sentiments. And rituals can be really big, like a wedding, and really small, like the green tea I would pick up on my way to work every day. The loss of these rituals is something we share as humanity in 2020. Interestingly, we've seen a rise in modern spirituality and mindfulness as a form of coping strategy. So look at the rise of Headspace and Calm, which is now offered by Amex as a premium card benefit. But this has also been a period for reassessment and searching for new meaning that has inspired many people to develop new rituals, family quiz events, Zoom Super Bowl parties. With both my husband and me working from home and my 2 kids doing e-learning, we now frequently have lunch together, which literally we have not done in over a decade. So we think brands have an opportunity to step in and help people to regain a sense of control and empowerment, to reconnect, to heal. In the US, in a search for new rituals, 75% of customers tried different stores or brands during the pandemic, and 60% of those expect to integrate those new brands or stores into their post-pandemic lives. So it's really essential that we figure out where those rituals are and think about how we respond in the era of rituals lost and found. So first of all, we need to ask if your brand is part of a habit or ritual. Then we need to understand the blank space left by lost ritual and design an appropriate experience to replace it, focusing on both the emotional connection as well as the functional. So we see 4 types of rituals that offer a blank space right now. We look at rituals that represent a portal between our different selves. So this is especially relevant for brands in beauty or grooming and fashion, where our ability to express ourselves through our appearance has been changed by lockdowns and new home working routines. There's also a blank space around rituals that offer a sense of belonging through products and services consumed in a social setting. Mars has actually done variety bags for Zoom costume parties and scary movie nights, which is a great way of kind of finding relevance in a new ritual. In Japan as well, there's an app that allows for smartphone users to cheer remotely during a match and have that sound played out in a stadium live. There's also rituals that offer a sense of comfort, such as me time rituals. This is, of course, very relevant to wellness, but also is an opportunity to connect emotionally to people in new ways. And lastly, there's rituals that serve as an anchor to our experiences as humans and social beings. The big moments, like weddings that are shared with others. The wedding website, shadi.com, created a new Weddings from Home, which seeks to bring as many of the most meaningful moments of an in-person event to virtual weddings. We have the opportunity to encourage rituals to transition from lost to found. We can help people feel more relevant and support psychological sustainability. While we're all in this together, our personal experiences vary, so it's important to remember that some people will be coping and grieving through rituals lost and found, while others will be embracing new sources of joy. Well, that's it. That's our Fjord Trends report for 2021. I hope you've enjoyed the overview and have a few provocations to think about. My hope is that you've seen a bit of how we can collectively navigate this new world together. And speaking of hope, let's keep talking about hope. It's the only way to approach the year and where we are going in the unmapped territory ahead. Thank you.